The political landscape in the United States has always been charged with debates, controversies, and high-stakes battles, but rarely has it been as tense as it is today. Former President Donald Trump continues to dominate headlines, not only as a central figure in American politics but also as a subject of legal challenges that could shape the nation's future. Recently, a critical development has emerged as the Supreme Court weighs the evidence presented by Representative Jasmine Crockett, raising questions about accountability, justice, and the very foundation of democratic institutions. This moment is not just about one individual, but about the balance of power, the rule of law, and the precedent that will define political leadership for generations. The significance of Representative Jasmine Crockett's evidence and its potential impact on Trump's legal battles lies at the very heart of one of the most consequential moments in modern American politics. The United States has seen countless political controversies over the years, but very few have drawn the kind of national and international attention that surrounds former President Donald Trump. The evidence that Representative Crockett has presented is not only a piece of legal documentation or testimony but also a reflection of the ongoing struggle to hold powerful individuals accountable in a system where political influence often blurs the lines between justice and immunity. This evidence, depending on its weight and how it is interpreted, could potentially tilt the balance in legal proceedings, making it more difficult for Trump to avoid scrutiny and further fueling public debate about fairness in the judicial process. At its core, evidence in a case that reaches the Supreme Court is not just about proving or disproving an individual's actions but about setting the standard by which the nation views justice. If Crockett's evidence is deemed credible and substantial, it could serve as a turning point in Trump's ongoing legal challenges. The very act of bringing this evidence before the highest court in the land elevates its importance, ensuring that it is not merely a partisan tool used in political theater but something that could influence how the judiciary interprets the actions of a former president. The scrutiny of this evidence will also highlight how the legal system addresses questions of presidential immunity, abuse of power, and potential violations of the law at the highest level of government. What makes this situation even more significant is the identity of the figure at the center of it. Donald Trump is not an ordinary defendant or a typical public figure facing allegations. He is a former president who remains an active political force with a strong base of supporters and a continuing influence on the Republican Party. Any legal proceeding involving him carries immense weight, not only because of the potential consequences for his personal future but also because of the message it sends about accountability for those who have occupied the highest office in the country. Crockett's evidence, therefore, has the potential to shape not just Trump's battles but also the very norms of political and legal accountability in the United States. The presentation of this evidence also draws attention to the role of Congress and its members in overseeing and challenging the conduct of the executive branch. Representatives like Jasmine Crockett carry the responsibility of ensuring that no individual, regardless of their position or power, is above the law. By introducing evidence against Trump, Crockett is not only fulfilling her role as a legislator but also stepping into the broader debate about the integrity of American democracy. Her decision to present this evidence to the Supreme Court demonstrates the seriousness of the claims and underscores the idea that this is not merely a partisan issue but a matter that demands judicial consideration at the highest level. The weight of the evidence itself is a matter of legal interpretation, but the symbolic value cannot be ignored. For Trump's critics, Crockett's evidence represents an opportunity to hold him accountable for actions that many believe crossed ethical and legal boundaries. For his supporters, however, the presentation of such evidence is often viewed through the lens of political persecution and bias. This polarization amplifies the significance of the Supreme Court's role, as it becomes the arbiter not just of legal fact but of the public's perception of justice. The court's willingness to even consider the evidence lends it legitimacy, creating a narrative that goes far beyond the individual facts of the case and into the realm of institutional trust and authority. Another important aspect of Crockett's evidence lies in the precedent it could set for future leaders. If the Supreme Court rules in a way that affirms the seriousness of the claims and allows the evidence to carry weight in Trump's legal battles, it will send a clear message to all political leaders that actions taken in office are not immune to accountability. On the other hand, if the evidence is dismissed or minimized, it could create an impression that former presidents and high-level officials enjoy protections that ordinary citizens do not. Either outcome will have lasting consequences for how the American people view the balance between power and responsibility, and Crockett's role in presenting the evidence places her at the center of this pivotal debate. The very act of compiling and presenting this evidence requires courage and determination, as it inevitably invites scrutiny, criticism, and political backlash. Crockett's decision to bring forth her findings reflects not only her commitment to her duty as a lawmaker but also her recognition of the historic significance of this moment. In doing so, she has placed herself in the broader narrative of those who have dared to challenge entrenched power and demand transparency from the most powerful individuals in the country. Her role may be debated, but it cannot be ignored, as it highlights the growing insistence among many Americans that leaders must be held to account, regardless of their political affiliations or past achievements. The potential impact of this evidence on Trump's legal battles is far-reaching. If it strengthens the case against him, it could complicate his ability to defend himself in other ongoing investigations and trials. Legal momentum is a powerful force, and once established, it often creates a ripple effect across multiple cases. Crockett's evidence, therefore, does not exist in isolation. It is part of a larger mosaic of legal and political challenges that Trump faces. Each piece of evidence, each ruling, and each interpretation contributes to the shaping of a narrative that will either protect him from accountability or expose him to consequences that could alter the trajectory of his political future. The intersection of law and politics in this case also underscores the delicate balance that the Supreme Court must maintain. By considering Crockett's evidence, the court is not only evaluating its legal merit but also weighing its potential to influence the broader political climate. The stakes are high because every decision the court makes resonates far beyond the courtroom, influencing public opinion, party strategies, and even the stability of democratic institutions. This is why the significance of Crockett's evidence cannot be reduced to a mere legal detail. It represents a moment of reckoning for both Trump and the nation's system of checks and balances. The Supreme Court's role in shaping accountability and setting a precedent for political leaders is one of the most critical aspects of the American judicial system, particularly when the actions of high-ranking officials or former presidents come under scrutiny. As the highest court in the United States, the Supreme Court has long held the authority to interpret the Constitution and determine how laws should be applied, but its influence extends far beyond legal rulings. Each decision it makes has the power to define the boundaries of accountability for leaders and to set precedents that guide the conduct of future administrations. When the court considers evidence against a figure as consequential as Donald Trump, it is not merely weighing facts in isolation. It is shaping the framework through which the nation understands the limits of power, the responsibilities of leadership, and the expectations of justice. At the heart of this process is the question of how leaders should be held accountable once they leave office. The presidency is a position of immense authority, granting the individual access to powers that affect not only domestic policies but also international relations and national security. However, the Constitution was never designed to place a president above the law, and the Supreme Court has the responsibility of ensuring that even the most powerful figures remain within the boundaries of legal and ethical standards. By considering cases involving Trump, the court is engaging in a crucial exercise of reinforcing, or potentially undermining, the idea that the rule of law applies equally to all citizens, regardless of their former or current positions of influence. The court's decisions in such matters also resonate across history, creating precedents that future courts and political leaders must grapple with. For instance, if the Supreme Court were to rule in a way that broadens the scope of presidential immunity, it could embolden future leaders to act with less concern for potential legal consequences. Conversely, if the court affirms that former presidents can and should be held accountable for their actions, it strengthens the principle that power is not absolute and that democratic institutions retain authority even over those who once occupied the highest office. This duality of potential outcomes highlights the immense responsibility the court carries when evaluating cases tied to political figures, as its rulings will shape the landscape of governance and accountability for generations. The broader implications extend into public trust in government and the judiciary. Americans often look to the Supreme Court as the final arbiter of justice, an institution that is supposed to stand apart from partisan politics and act solely in the interest of upholding the Constitution. When the court takes on cases that involve political leaders, the public's perception of its impartiality comes into sharp focus. If the court is seen as bending to political pressure or aligning with one party over another, its credibility risks being diminished. On the other hand, if the court upholds principles of accountability in a transparent and balanced way, it reinforces its legitimacy as a cornerstone of American democracy. The case involving Trump is therefore not just about one man but about the credibility of the court itself and the message it sends about fairness in the justice system. Another important aspect of the court's role is its ability to create clarity in moments of political division. The United States is deeply polarized, and Trump's presence in political life has heightened these divisions. For his supporters, investigations and legal challenges are often framed as partisan attacks, while for his critics, they represent overdue attempts at accountability. The Supreme Court's rulings have the potential to cut through these narratives, offering a constitutional interpretation that carries more weight than political rhetoric. Even though rulings are often debated and criticized, the authority of the court provides a sense of finality and legal grounding in debates that might otherwise spiral into endless partisan conflict. The court also acts as a safeguard against the abuse of power by interpreting the Constitution in ways that reaffirm checks and balances. In moments when political leaders test the limits of their authority, the judiciary has historically served as the branch capable of drawing boundaries. By considering evidence and legal challenges against Trump, the Supreme Court demonstrates that the separation of powers remains intact and that no individual, regardless of their influence, can entirely escape oversight. This principle is essential for the health of the republic, as it ensures that leaders cannot redefine the limits of their authority unchecked by other institutions. The ripple effects of the court's involvement reach beyond politics and into civic life. When ordinary citizens see that powerful leaders are subject to the same laws as everyone else, it reinforces their faith in equality before the law. If the opposite perception takes hold, that leaders can act without accountability, it erodes confidence in democracy and fosters disillusionment among the electorate. The Supreme Court's decisions therefore help maintain the delicate social contract between the government and its citizens, where justice is expected to be impartial and consistent, regardless of an individual's wealth, influence, or office. Furthermore, the court's handling of such cases often influences global perceptions of the United States. As one of the world's leading democracies, the actions of American institutions are closely observed by other nations. When the Supreme Court demonstrates its commitment to accountability and the rule of law, it strengthens the country's position as a model of democratic governance. If, however, it appears to falter in this responsibility, it provides ammunition for critics who argue that American democracy is flawed or hypocritical. This international dimension adds another layer of significance to the court's rulings, as they extend beyond domestic politics to affect the nation's standing in the world. In addition to its legal responsibilities, the court's engagement in these matters serves as a reminder of the fragility of democratic institutions. The Founding Fathers designed a system of government built on checks and balances, where no single branch could dominate unchecked. Yet the durability of this system depends on the willingness of each branch to exercise its authority responsibly. By shaping accountability for leaders through its rulings, the Supreme Court is actively participating in the preservation of that balance. Its willingness to uphold constitutional principles even in the face of political controversy reflects the resilience of the democratic system, showing that the institutions designed to protect the republic remain capable of fulfilling their roles. The importance of precedent cannot be overstated in this context. Every ruling the Supreme Court issues becomes part of the legal fabric. The broader implications for democracy, public trust, and the future of American politics are immense when the nation watches as the legal system grapples with the accountability of a former president. At the heart of any democracy lies the principle that all individuals are equal under the law, and when questions arise about whether this principle is upheld for the most powerful figures, it directly affects how citizens perceive the legitimacy of their institutions. The case involving Donald Trump, along with Representative Jasmine Crockett's evidence being considered by the Supreme Court, goes far beyond the outcome of one legal battle. It strikes at the foundation of public trust in the justice system and the belief that democracy can function fairly, regardless of political affiliation or status. The way these proceedings unfold will shape the political culture of the United States for years to come and determine how citizens engage with their government. Democracy depends not only on laws and institutions but also on the willingness of citizens to trust those institutions. If people believe the system is rigged or biased, their faith in the democratic process weakens. The controversy surrounding Trump's legal challenges and the evidence being weighed by the Supreme Court has already heightened divisions among the public. To some, this is a moment of long-awaited accountability where a powerful figure is finally facing scrutiny for his actions. To others, it is perceived as a politically motivated attack, designed to weaken a leader who continues to influence American politics. These competing narratives reveal just how fragile public trust has become and how much weight the Supreme Court's decisions will carry in either reinforcing or further eroding that trust. The broader implications extend to how democracy is defined and protected in practice. For decades, the United States has positioned itself as a global champion of democratic values, emphasizing accountability, transparency, and the rule of law. When a former president faces legal scrutiny, the nation has an opportunity to demonstrate that its principles are not just ideals but realities applied to everyone. If accountability is applied consistently, it strengthens democracy by showing that leadership does not grant immunity from the law. If it appears that political influence shields leaders from consequences, however, it undermines the very foundation of democratic governance and creates a sense of disillusionment that weakens civic engagement. The future of American politics is also deeply tied to the outcomes of these proceedings. Trump remains a polarizing figure whose presence continues to shape the direction of the Republican Party and influence the broader political landscape. The way his legal battles unfold will affect not only his political viability but also the strategies of both major parties. If he is perceived as being unfairly targeted, it could energize his supporters and deepen their resolve to challenge the political establishment. If the evidence against him is seen as credible and leads to significant consequences, it could shift public opinion and alter the trajectory of upcoming elections. Either outcome will reshape the strategies of politicians, campaign narratives, and voter priorities in the years ahead. Another important implication lies in the expectations of future leaders. The treatment of Trump and the handling of Crockett's evidence by the Supreme Court will set a precedent that all future presidents and high-ranking officials will observe. If accountability is enforced, it may deter future leaders from overstepping their authority, knowing that legal consequences remain possible even after leaving office. On the other hand, if accountability is seen as weak or inconsistent, it could embolden leaders to push the boundaries of their power, believing that the risks of facing real consequences are minimal. This dynamic directly impacts how responsibly leaders govern and whether they act with the interests of the nation in mind or prioritize personal and political gain. Public trust is not only influenced by the court's ruling itself but also by how transparent and credible the process appears. In an age of misinformation, social media, and political echo chambers, the way information is presented to the public plays a significant role in shaping perceptions. If the process appears rushed, biased, or lacking in fairness, citizens are less likely to trust the outcome, regardless of what the evidence reveals. This is why the handling of Crockett's evidence and the court's consideration of it is so important not only legally but also symbolically. The perception of fairness can be as influential as the legal facts themselves in determining whether democracy feels legitimate to the people it serves. The implications extend to civic participation as well. When citizens believe that the system is working and that accountability applies equally to everyone, they are more likely to engage in politics, vote, and contribute to civic life. When they believe the system is broken or corrupt, they withdraw, creating a vacuum that can be filled by more extreme voices. This erosion of participation threatens the stability of democracy itself, as the legitimacy of government depends on the active involvement of its citizens. The way Trump's case is handled, therefore, will have ripple effects not only in courtrooms and political chambers but also in the everyday decisions of citizens about whether or not to trust and engage with their government. Internationally, the implications are just as profound. The United States is often looked to as a model of democracy, and the world is closely watching how the country handles this moment. If the process demonstrates that even the most powerful can be held accountable, it reinforces America's credibility as a leader in promoting democratic values globally. If, however, the process appears compromised or politically motivated, it provides ammunition for critics of democracy and emboldens authoritarian leaders who argue that accountability is a myth. The handling of Trump's legal challenges is therefore not only about domestic politics but also about America's role on the world stage and its ability to advocate for democratic governance abroad. The broader implications also touch on the resilience of institutions. Democracies are tested not in times of stability but in moments of crisis and division. The United States is facing such a test, and the role of the Supreme Court, Congress, and other institutions in navigating it will reveal whether the system remains strong enough to withstand challenges to its integrity. If institutions uphold accountability and reinforce the rule of law, they emerge stronger and more resilient. If they falter or bend to political pressures, the damage to democracy could be long-lasting, weakening not just the present but the future of governance in the nation. The future of American politics will inevitably be shaped by how this moment is remembered. Generations ahead will look back on the legal challenges facing Trump and the evidence brought forward by Representative Crockett as a defining moment in the struggle to reconcile power with accountability. The decisions made now will influence not only the fate of one political figure but also the standards by which future leaders are judged. They will shape the relationship between citizens and their government, determine the level of trust in democratic institutions, and define the resilience of the nation's political culture in the face of division and controversy.